There probably is a mixed opinion, but one should make a ruling without having to think it. So what we know about it, there probably is the mix. There is some khawarij, some not, but exact ruling doesn't affect us at this point. So we don't think we should do that because their enemies usually are not good people. So does that make it good people? Yeah, I would say it's interesting. Yeah, they have students of knowledge. That's what Rabbi Ben is. They go to study in madrasa, but they have some students going about.
The father must say he heard if you pray a certain way with them,
but then now you're gonna feel like
it's like a threat to their idea, their order, you know?
That's a problem. You don't agree with them. That's part of the extremists when they kill others. Agree with them. Resemble some of the theology. I don't know much about them, and I haven't heard ulama giving a ruling. So I usually convey the ilm. I don't make ilm. So I haven't heard any ulama saying anything.
So the jury's out.
Yeah, jury is out. I would say one shouldn't go and fight with them and join them, but at the same time, are they like as bad as Al Qaeda and that? Probably not, but I don't know which. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we have one of our brothers brought an idea why we're talking about these groups to start with. And remind them about the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. افترقت اليهود على 71 شعبة أو فرقة وافترقت النصارى على 72 فرقة وتفترق أمتي أو هذه الأمة على 73 فرقة كلها في النار إلا واحدة. قالوا من هي يا رسول الله؟ قال ما هي أنا عليه اليوم وأصحابي وفي رواية الجماعة. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had described people before us. They got message. So he got the Jews first. They got their message, but they splintered to 71 groups. Christians splintered to 72 groups. A Muslim was splintered to 73 groups. Now, a lot of ulama say it's not numerical that 71, but it tells you more. So there are more Christian sects than there are Jewish sects. And there is more Muslim sects than Jewish or Christian sects. So this is the fact. All of them in hellfire, the Jewish sects, the Christian sects, and Muslim sects, except one, the one that following what Rasulullah ﷺ is practicing, he and his companions. So even if people come later on, they say we're Muslims, they read in the Quran, we follow the Quran, but they reject the practice of the Sahaba, those who learned from the Messenger ﷺ. They practice, they reject. If somebody rejects that knowledge and practice, then he's not following the path of the saved group. So it's Islam, as we said, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah believe we should follow Quran and Sunnah بفهم سلف الأمة, the way the early generation understood it and practiced it. Because otherwise, you can read the Quran and says this group, it means this kind of people. Pray, it means you need to devote yourself. Zakah, you need just to be a good person. Fasting, I think fasting means I don't do anything bad. And you're just describing whatever words, you would change the meanings of it. Khamr, you change it, you say, oh, khamr was wine. Nowadays, it's can consider beer or considered whatever name you give it to it, and it's not haram. So it has to be the understanding and the practice of the first generation, their students, second generation, their students, the third generation, their Salaf al-Ummah.
Sheikh, so all the sects of Jews and Christians will be in hell for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
What about the ones, the Muslim ones? Will they be in hell for eternity, or
no,
until they'll spend some
time?
Oh,
you're talking about now?
Yeah.
So the early sects of Jews and Christians, they were Muslim. So the followers, the students of Musa, the students of Isa, the early generation, they follows Islam. They believe in one God, you follow his orders, and there's no association of partners with Allah. They're Muslim, they go to the paradise. Nowadays, you don't find these sects in Jews and Christians. In Muslims, the ones, it depends how much they deviated from the message. So there could be mild deviation will be responsible, they can be forgiven or not, or might not. As we said, it could be a total. If somebody committed blood and he thought that it was okay to kill Muslims right and left, he's somebody, he can be in hellfire forever because of the ayah, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا. Whoever intentionally kill a believer, he will be in hellfire for eternity. So it could be, but we know the general rule, Allah is generous. When He promised something, He will do it. If He warns against something, He might or might not do it, but He's merciful. الوعد محقق, الوعيد قد يحصل وقد لا يحصل. So when Allah is warning of something, it's up to Him because He's merciful. He cannot carry that warning, but He's capable of doing it. But when He promised something, He will fulfill the promise. If He promised a reward and forgiveness, He will do it. If He promised a punishment, then it's up to Him. He can carry that punishment or not.
Yeah, so Sheikh, I have like a couple of questions. So the first one is like, we don't know like what's happening behind, right? Like, within the politicians.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So a lot of time we don't know exactly what's their discussion, why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. We don't know the complete picture. We know what is being, we are seeing in the media and stuff like that. So, do we need to have a strong opinion on anything, what's happening? Like, I mean, how much we should be aware of what's happening, like, how much opinions we should have, like, on a certain group and stuff like that?
I think we're having too much opinion. I think most of us are indulging into certain details of politics that, as you know, we don't know what's exactly happening behind closed doors, what's their logic. Second of all, we have no influence of it. So this is what some people say, the circle of interest and the circle of influence. We have a circle of interest that's very big. Our circle of influence is small. So we might be interested about what's happening to our Muslim brothers in Gaza, what's happening in Sudan, in Yemen, in Syria, and in every country, but we have little influence in it. So we waste a lot of times our energy and efforts in things that we cannot change, and we don't put enough effort in things that we can change. So I know my own mistakes. I should put more effort fixing me, advising my family, my closest circle, rather than I'm talking about governments and kings and presidents and so on. So to a degree, yes, you don't want to be sitting in a cocoon and you don't care about Muslims. You care. It hurts us to see Muslims being unfairly treated, or any human being unfairly treated. Dhulm in general is against nature of humans, the nature of believers. So unfairness, it hurts us. Yes, it does. We need to be aware of it, but I wouldn't say we should be spending more time on it than things that we need. You see people following the news more than they read the Quran. So it shouldn't be to that extreme. The Sahaba, they were aware what's going on. They knew when the Romans were building an army to come and fight, when certain tribes were doing something, when a poet is putting a certain piece of poet against the Prophet ﷺ, he's inciting his tribe to go and fight and so on. They're aware of these things. But at the same time, to a degree, because there were people who decide what needs to be done. So they had influence on that decision. For us, most of the time, we don't know what's going on exactly, and we have no influence of it. So I think to a degree, we shouldn't get too much indulged. Well,
so two brothers had two questions. So one of them was relating to the previous topic, the one before that. So he basically asked, so he was reading, he's a new Muslim, and he came across the ayah, إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والنصارى والصابئين من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وعمل صالحا فلهم أجرهم عند ربهم ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. And he kind of thought that this ayah is referring to current day Christians who are devout Christians who may have heard of Islam, maybe did not get the full picture, but in their own way they're basically Muslim, like if you look at them from one way. So he was asking, does this verse apply to them, or does that apply to the, like to the previous nations and like modern day people? If somebody received the message, then there's no excuse for them. That's the first one.
So the question the brother was asking, that somebody sent it online, about the ayah that talks about the believers, the Christians, the Jews, the Majus, and other sects, that whoever believes in Allah, do right thing, he'll be forgiven and will get his reward in the hereafter. Is it something talking about history, past, or talking about present or the future? It definitely covers the past, because as we said, the early believers, whether they're followers of Noah, followers of Hud, Saleh, whatever nation, any believer, all of them were Muslims. إن هذه أمتكم أمة واحدة وأنا ربكم فاعبدون وأنا ربكم فاتقون. That this nation, as believers throughout history, from time Adam till the end of times, will Messiah will come and the last of believers will leave this earth with him. Then they all one belief. So we're all Muslims. So this is the difference, that Islam is not a new religion. It did not start with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1400 years ago. All the prophets are Muslim. So if you're at time of Musa, you'll be following Musa, and you will be considered Muslims, and you will be considered a believer and go to Jannah. After the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anybody that hears about him, does not believe in him, is not considered a believer. If they receive the correct message. Some people, they might not have received the correct message about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if they have the right intention, if they knew the truth, they would accept the truth regardless where it's coming. And happen they don't know the truth, Allah knows best about them. He will judge them. So it's not up to us. Allah will test. How about those who died before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they live in an era they never heard of him? Allah will test them. They'll be judged by Allah. But what we need to know about it, that nowadays living human beings, they need, once they hear about the message of Islam, investigate it, find the truth about it, and don't listen to the mass media that spoil that truth. And once, with an open mind, that if they find it to be the truth, to follow it, then they become true believers. And we find a lot of them. Every year we have a lot of groups of people who are going back into Islam when they look really deep into it. So Allah, I think that should be enough answer for this.
So the people that die non-Muslim,
Yeah.
they don't ever go to Jannah, right? Is that...
Yeah, so a non-Muslim, those who have no intention to find the truth, and they did not try to find the truth, they die in a state of other than the truth, then they're not hoping for it. They're not going to go to Jannah.
Sure.
Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he asked about his own parents, although they died before he was born, but they were not looking for the truth. He said they're going to hell.
Sheikh, I would add to that. The Reaver sister also asked, what to kind of connect with this, that she went to a monastery before, and she seen a lot of females that were somewhat seem righteous, the virgins and worshiping and everything. They've been doing this their whole life. She said when she seen them, they seemed angelic, and you know, their faces and everything, right? She said she's having a hard time. How can they be people like this be judged in a way? How would Allah deal with them?
So the biggest sin a person can commit is to reject God or disrespect God and attribute to him son, partners, and so on. So if they committed that biggest sin that Allah has created him and told them don't do it, then they're worthy of the punishment. If they haven't committed it, there's a lot of Christians don't believe in Trinity. They believe in God as the creator and Jesus being a noble person who carried the message, was a good person. So deep inside them, they don't believe in Trinity. So these people deeply, and this is the common sense, most people, for them, the whole idea of Trinity doesn't make sense. So if they truly believe in one God, they're believers, and Allah will judge them. Again, as we said, we don't have to judge people. Allah judge them. We know what is the truth. All what you need to know the truth and follow the truth. If you reject the truth, Allah will be judging them, sending them to hellfire if they're worthy of it, or forgive them if they're worthy of forgiveness. But we know the only people admitted to paradise will people have pure faith in Allah, one creator, has no partners, never had a wife, never had children, did not give birth, never, and so on. He's the only one to be obeyed. That's the only key that Allah will accept for a person to step into Jannah. And then the good deeds, bad deeds will be balanced, will be judged against it, and so on. So a believer who believes in that, but he committed sins, Allah might forgive him or punish him for his sin, but eventually he'll go to Jannah because he had the basic belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anybody has that basic belief, which a lot of people carry, but they need to add to it that they're willing to follow the truth. And the truth came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Since Musa has the truth, Isa has the truth, but it has been changed and altered so much. Nowadays, you cannot find the teaching of Musa and Isa. What you have in the Old Testament, New Testament, words of humans, you don't know who conveyed it from Musa and Isa. There's a lot of alterations in it. Some of it are words of God, some of it are not. Quran is an everlasting message revealed by Allah, preserved word for word till the end of time, so you know it is the truth.
So somebody else asked another question. They need help. How can they achieve khushu' during prayer, especially that they don't speak Arabic yet, and the advice of telling them try to think about what you're saying does not really apply. So they need some tips to help them achieve this khushu', because every time they get into prayer, especially if it's in congregation, their mind just drifts away because they're listening to a different language.
Yes, so just think about the meanings of their actions. And they need to know the meanings of the word of the Imam. So when the Imam say Allah Akbar, even if they cannot say Allah Akbar, he's glorifying that Allah is the greatest. So when they're making ruku', they're bowing, they're bowing, they're respecting Allah that had created everything. When they're making sujood, so they need to understand their action, what it means, how close they can imagine that some of the Salihin, he described himself. He thinks he's praying in front of Allah. He's got heaven on his right side, hell on his left side, and that's it. Everything else doesn't matter. He wants to please Allah, get to Jannah, be saved from hellfire. If he thinks about these actions, devout, ask to get closer to Allah, ask for forgiveness, for guidance, and so on, that will give him the khushu' and the concentration. Of course, they shouldn't keep it too long not understanding. It might be okay for the first week that you don't know these words, but week by week, they should learn what these words are, either utter it or just listening to it, know what it is, but it shouldn't take too long. You expect in a few weeks a person knows the basics of Allahu Akbar, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, what the Imam is saying. And Al-Fatiha, they should know the words of it. And then the rest of the ayat, surah, yes, it might take them time. Somebody reciting from one of the long surah, they might not have read. So in their mind, they're just thinking about how majestic Allah is, glorifying Him, asking for guidance and forgiveness.
So one of the answers that they gave, according to this, some of them said, and I'm trying to see if this is permissible, is one of them said that they imagine how, while they're in salah, they think about how Allah has created the trees and how amazing it is, and they in
the universe.
How is that's permissible?
Yeah. So if somebody doesn't know the words, doesn't know what to say, it's the status of you are making prostration, devotion to the Creator of this universe. Because of what they imagine, He created this earth, He created the heavens, He created anything. Yeah, you're glorifying Him. That would help you. But eventually you need to know the words, what they mean, and focus on them. But as I said, temporarily, early on, yes, but you need to bring yourself to that state.
I had one question, but one of the answers confused me, so I need to clarify. مسألة if somebody قاتل النفس, if somebody kills one person intentionally, and they go to the hellfire for eternity, do they ever get back? If they're Muslim, do they ever get out?
So there are conditions here. So let's say somebody totally unjustly, criminal, he goes, kills somebody, steals his money. He repents, he accept the punishment, execution, as the just cause for him, his execution is his expiation. So that will be, he would be forgiven. He understands what he's done is wrong. He accepts, yes, I deserve the capital punishment because what I've done. So this punishment is expiation for him. But he need to accept that. Another state that he got away with it. He never got caught, but he regretted it. He tried to fix it, find the relatives, whatever, pay them blood money. If he couldn't find it, he tried to do good in his life, truly repent to Allah. Allah knows in his heart, truly good person. Somebody who never repented and said it is okay to kill Muslims and so on, that's somebody, he might reach a point where he's transgressing against Allah himself, where he's refusing the orders of Allah, say, I can kill whoever I want. That's somebody, he might not be forgiven, but Allah knows what his intention. And then you have the groups of people who have doubts, like Khawarij. When they thought they're fighting, they killed Ali and they killed Uthman and so on, because this is what Allah wants from them. So that's somebody Allah knows best in their heart, they will be judged. It's up to Allah to judge them.
Yeah, I guess the question really is about Muslim. He's still a Muslim.
At the end, they will get from, if somebody has one grain of faith in him, saying La ilaha illallah once in his life, believing in it, he died believing in it, eventually he'll go to heaven. Even if he kills, وَإِن سَرَقَ وَإِن زَنَى. Abu Dhar, he asked Rasulullah, he said, if he stole, if he committed adultery, he asked him several times, and Rasulullah said, yes, وَلَوْ رَغِمَ أَنْفُ أَبِي ذَرٍ. He say, even if Abu Dhar didn't like it and his nose was down in the earth, in the dirt, because he doesn't like it. Allah at the end, his mercy overcomes his anger and wrath. He's merciful, that's his description. Out of his mercy, he need to punish the sinners. So that's out of his mercy that believers are rewarded and sinners are. This is a mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as long as they had a line where they acknowledge Allah, know that He is the Creator, He's the only one that needs to be worshipped, His rules is the supreme one, then the person is a believer, but if they're sinners, they'll be held accountable for their sins.
Okay, so the second question is related to this answer too, which is citing right? Punishment and the promise. You mentioned that Allah Azza wa Jalla will enact his promise, but the punishment it's might change.
Yeah, that the punishment is up to Allah. He might carry it or might forgive for it. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا فَأَذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. So Allah telling us that we should avoid usury and giving people loan them with interest and so on. If we don't, He's warning us from a war from Allah and His Messenger. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. It's a warning. But if something happens, we fighting among one another, well, that's part of it.
We had someone in Egypt, I'm not sure if I should say his name or not. Anyway, he said like the same thing like a couple of weeks ago. But he was referring to that if you go on the day of judgment and you find that Allah Azza wa Jalla forgive Fir'aun, for example, you shouldn't be like surprised. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla might go back on his punishment. He's using the exact same sentence that he.
Yeah, the ulama have said this is for the believers. Non-believers, there's no way out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised Fir'aun, he described how he's going to be punished day and night he and his people in the grave, and the hereafter they will be suffering from hellfire. النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا يقدم قومه يوم القيامة فأوردهم النار. So he's like a leader of his people into hellfire. So we know this is for sure.
I was just asking this because he used the same sentence.
Yeah.
Allah Azza wa Jal will enact his promise, but the punishment is up to Allah.
No, except for matters of kufr, shirk and kufr. إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به ويغفر ما دون ذلك من يشاء. So where's the line you draw the line? Shirk, because Allah told us where the line is. Allah does not forgive somebody to associate partners with Him, and He forgives anything else. So yeah, anybody else can be forgiven. If you see Al-Hajjaj in Al-Jannah, you will be surprised. Hajjaj was a tyrant, he killed a lot of good people. He might eventually Allah forgive him and get into Jannah. Yes, because he was a believer. He prayed. He's one of the early people who ordered to have punctuation marks in the Quran. He carried jihad and so on. But he was a tyrant. We talk about him as being a zalim. A lot of people after him were even bigger zalim than him. But he started it as having the bloodshed of Muslims as a piece of cake for him, easy. He started it. But yeah, such a person, yeah. But Fir'aun, no. Allah told us He's not going to forgive him.
Okay, so the final question is, was he referring to people of Jannah or was he referring to Khawarij?
Both. Both. So for him, he never declared Muawiyah kafir. He never declared Khawarij kafir. So he's not fighting it because they're kafir. He's fighting them because they were unjust. At that time, it wasn't a creed, a matter of aqidah. It was a matter of practicality about him being the Khalifa. Sama' wa ta'a should be for him. And he's the one who decides who to be punished and not. He didn't consider either party being a kafir. And the same thing that applied for Muawiyah. When he was fighting Ali, he was not fighting Ali because he considered him a kafir. So both parties. So the only people who were extreme, that's why the people of Muawiyah are still considered Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But the people of Khawarij are not Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah because they consider both parties kafir. So there's a difference here. They took a matter of creed there was a matter of political, who rules, who put the order.
So one more question, how much the government, for example, Muslim governments, they should enforce Islam on their subjects, right? Do they have
I wouldn't say enforce Islam. There are certain rules. There's Islamic laws that should be carried out. There's minimum according to how much of this Islam true Islamic government. Yeah, we will carry Islam, but they would not interfere in personal life. What do you do in personal life? So somebody drinking in his house, the government shouldn't go in and break his door and check if they're drinking or not. Somebody has a girlfriend, they're not married, shouldn't break their door and check whether these two couples are married or not. But out in public, yeah, Islamic laws should be enforced. To a degree, you're not going to force people to go to the masjid and pray, but at the same time, there should be certain decency. You don't expect men to be wearing very short, revealing clothes. Same thing for women, not to be wearing short. It's almost not happening. Nowadays, we're happy if the government is not persecuting Islam. We're not reaching the point to say the government should enforce Islam. We are in this country because we're allowed to practice Islam without being persecuted. So the bar is becoming lower and lower. That we're accepting. Yeah, I mean, if I'm able to come to the masjid here, I pray, fast, and so on, I'm accepting that. This is not ideal, but it's better than being persecuted for my faith.
So that brings a question to me. Like being in this country, a form, since like some scholars I hear say you have to do da'wah to be in a country like this, right? What would it be like? Would it be any form of da'wah, like maybe constant da'wah? Do you have to be in a state of constant da'wah? Like
So da'wah, يا أيها النبي جاهد الكفار والمنافقين واغلظ عليهم ومأواهم جهنم وبئس المصير. When you make jihad, وجاهدهم به جهادا كبيرا, and so on, it is the da'wah that you give according to your ability and the situation you're in. You're not going to go to the beach and tell a woman to wear hijab. It's not going to work. You're not going to do a bar and tell people alcohol is haram. It's not going to work. You're not going to do a gay bar and tell them you're following the people of Lut, sodomy, and so on, and going to go all to hell. Doesn't work this way. فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. So when you're using wisdom and good advice, you need to have the approach that's acceptable by people. The most important one being a good example. I mean, that's what you find a lot of people who entered Islam and they worked with Muslims and they were impressed with their morality, with their honesty and so on. That if you become a good example, that by itself is a da'wah. Now,
that would cover the being.
That's the minimum. But at the same time, if you have people around you have question about Islam, you should convey the right thing. You're not going to be lying. You say, oh, is it true in Islam the woman is not supposed to do this or do that, and she's allowed to do this and do that and so on? Then you explain to her, this is the da'wah that you go. But you're not going to start right away if somebody out of the blue. Do you know in Islam we're allowed to have 4 women as wives? I mean, come on, what kind of da'wah is this? Muslim women are not accepting this idea. You're going to start with it. So if somebody asks you, they start with this, or is it true that the Prophet ﷺ, he married a child that was 10 years old or 11 years old? And said, you judging a historic fact that nobody criticized him at the time of history. It was women in that time, they get puberty early on, 8 and 9 years old. They get married 10 and 11 years old. That was the common thing at that time. So you're not going to judge with our standards nowadays what's happening. Do you know how old was Mary when she had gave birth to Isa? She was a teenager. Some sources say 12 or 13 years old. When you're talking about what is his name? Romeo and Juliet. They're teenagers, 14 and 15 years old. But at that time, they're considered man and woman, and so on. So things are shifting throughout history. We cannot judge them. So this is the da'wah I'm talking about. But most important da'wah is for you, for your family, to save them. I mean, how many people are going to impress outside if you're not impressing your own children? Yes, you shouldn't be living in a non-Muslim country unless you're making da'wah if you have a choice. A lot of us living in this country because we don't have a choice. If you go to another place, either you're going to be persecuted or you're not going to be able to afford or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why people are choosing to live in a non-Muslim country. And as a lot of brothers tell you, that most Muslim countries are not practicing Islam. But they are to different degrees. Yes, most Muslim countries, you can pray, your woman can have hijab, you don't have to drink alcohol. Yes, there are banks, but you don't have to deal with interest. There are places that sell alcohol, but you don't have to buy alcohol and drink it, and so on. So, اتقوا الله ما استطعتم. As much to your ability, you need to do more good and less harm. The words that you say, the actions that you do. Some people are harsh in their approach to da'wah to Muslims and non-Muslims. They turn them away from it. So if you can become a good example where people at least understand your faith and respect it, that by itself is da'wah. If you listen make it less the number of people that hate this religion, that by itself is da'wah. And you can see nowadays, I mean, it's very impressive what you see in colleges, what's happening. If people were responding to what's happening in Gaza with violence, with burning places and killing and so on, they're not going to have that sympathy. So sometimes, yeah, people might be eager to take things into their own hand, but it leads to more harm to it. The pressure might not feel that it's doing anything, but it could have been worse for the people of Gaza, whether for the dua, for the support of Muslims, and then the effect on non-Muslims, that what's happening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides support in different ways for people, and that might be one of it. Inshallah, we'll stop here. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.